My name is Brittany Grant. I'm the Director of Business Development here at The Hill. I'm happy to welcome you to this morning's event, Workers and the Innovation Age. First, I'd like to thank our sponsors, Paycheck, for your continued support and underwriting this morning's program. For both workers and employers, the changes coming to the office are not far in the distance, but instead something that must be grappled with now. Advances in automation, most notably the dramatic rise in artificial intelligence and other innovative technologies, have ushered in new concepts of what exactly it means to earn a living. It's not just workers and employees who are sitting up and taking notice. Today, we'll hear from members of Congress and experts about putting in place policies that support workers of today while preparing for the workforce for tomorrow. From the risk of a widening skills gap and increased workforce inequality to workers' anxieties surrounding healthcare benefits and retirement savings, today's discussions will paint a clearer picture of what we can expect to see in tomorrow's workforce. But first, a few quick housekeeping notes. In addition to our audience here at the museum, we are also live streaming on thehill.com as well as the Hill's Facebook page. Please keep your phones on silent throughout the duration of the program, but we can encourage you to engage the conversation on social media. You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn at The Hill Events and join the conversation using the hashtag #TheHillWorkforceInno. We will be taking questions from the audience during the program, so please be on the lookout for members of our team with handheld mics. Finally, you will receive an electronic survey following the conclusion of today's event. We are always eager to hear how we can make our events more dynamic. So I encourage you to take a few moments to provide your feedback on today's program. So with that, let's dive right in. It's my pleasure to introduce Senator Rob Portman. Senator Portman is a leading voice on Capitol Hill on employment issues and currently serves as the co-chair of the Senate Career and Technical Education Caucus. The senator recently introduced Jumpstart Our Businesses by Supporting Students, the Jobs Act. This legislation aims to close skill gaps by expanding education and training programs to provide workers access to the skills demanded by today's ever-changing workplace. Joining Senator Portman on stage is my colleague Steve Clemens, the Hill's editor-at-large. Steve, over to you.
Hey, thank you very much. Come on out, Senator. Hey, everybody. Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
You know, I've had the pleasure of knowing the Senate for a long time. I usually think of you as the United States Trade Representative, with all due respect to the Senate.
Let's not talk about
you know,
that this morning.
yeah, you know, I was going to say, you know, Bob Lighthizer. Do you know where he was born?
In Ohio. He
was born in Ashtabula, Ohio. And he was
Ashtabula.
Ashtabula. Okay,
yeah.
well,
yeah.
Look, it's always the emphasis on the syllable, right?
Yeah, so, exactly.
You know, I'm not going to go into trade, but it did occur to me that, you know, you're going to run again in 2022, and Bob might, you know, say, hey, you were a USTR, why not, you know, run for Senate? Why not?
I think I'm the only USTR that ever has successfully been elected to anything. So
I think that's actually true.
It's not necessarily the best. When I went to USTR, people said, well, you must have a great future. I said, you can tell I have no future in politics. I'm choosing to be at the trade rep because it's a tough job.
Let me start our conversation with a visit you made recently to Sinclair Community College.
Yeah.
And I, you know, just a quick snapshot of Sinclair Community College, and I think that the message you shared there was extremely relevant to today's topic.
Okay. Yeah, Sinclair is a community college, and actually last weekend I spoke at another commencement at Marion Tech.
So let's spread it around to all the good community.
So all the community colleges. Yeah. But I love giving the graduation speeches at community colleges because I think that's where the action is, with all due respect. Because in Ohio today, and I think this is generally true in our country, we have this skills gap that can be filled only by flexible and responsive programs that are primarily somewhere between high school and a college degree. And that's what they provide, a lot of certificate programs. These are industry-recognized certificates. Think coding and other IT jobs. Think welding, machinist. Think truck driving. Think of all the healthcare tech jobs, bioscience jobs. That's what we need in Ohio. The National Skills Coalition recently came out with a study saying that half of all the jobs in America over the next 4 years are going to be middle skill jobs. What does that mean? Middle skills is all those jobs I talked about, but they're jobs that require something more than a high school degree and more than career technical education even,
right.
But not necessarily a college degree. And I think that's where the action is. And to the future of work, not to go right to your next question, but the future of work is going to be the demand for flexibility. and
So
responsiveness.
do you think our credentialing system is broken?
I do, because it's not funded. And one of the, I think, unfair things we have in our system currently is that if you'd like to go to a community college or a four-year college or university in Ohio, say Ohio State, and your family income is below a certain level, you can get a Pell Grant, which is wonderful, because then you don't end up with the student debt that unfortunately so many people do, $27,000 on average in Ohio. But if you want to get a certificate to get a good paying job with good benefits that is in demand right now, if you go on ohiomeansjobs.com, all of you with your iPhones do it, you'll see 155,000 jobs being offered right now, this morning. And most are Middleskill jobs. And you cannot get a Pell Grant to do that.
Right.
And I think that's unfair. That's what the
Well,
Jobs Act
this is
about.
what your Jobs Act, which is the Jumpstart Our Businesses by Supporting Students Act, the Jobs Act. And
It's
I know
kind of
you're
labor.
trying to.
We've had to figure out a way to get to jobs.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty creative
Yeah.
acronyming.
Yeah.
But you're trying to get this as part of the Higher Education Act, and it actually stands a good chance, as I understanding, of moving into something the president might sign. And I guess one question I have is, when you look out there and you're trying to find a more flexible credentialing system, help people where they are move forward. Are there pieces of this that you think, when you think about the Ohioans that are out there and sort of trying to piece together a future? We have a lot of impacts coming up, automation, you mentioned Pell. The president is, as I understand it, trying to reprogram some of that Pell money to get us back to the moon. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I wasn't aware of that. But,
Yeah, that's the
sounds like a
new thing,
moonshot.
going to the moon again. And I guess some of the Pell money is going to help fund some of that.
Well, had not heard that. Pell is really important. We need to keep Pell for colleges and universities, but we need to expand it and allow it to be used also for these 15-week or less certificate programs that are, again, quality programs, industry-recognized credentials. We need to be careful we're not wasting the money. I will say, with regard to Pell and the Congressional Budget Office that scores all of these proposals, Senator Kaine and I are the co-authors of this Jobs Act, as well as the co-chairs of the Career and Technical Caucus. But we believe strongly that we're going to save some money in Pell over time, because you think about it, much of Pell is being used currently for young people who do go to college or university. Most of those people, unfortunately, are not getting that degree. They're not getting a certificate or a degree, by the way. Whereas if you have someone in a 15-week training program, the chances of completion are extremely high based on the record. And the data shows that those individuals who take a Pell are likely to use that Pell very efficiently and effectively to get a credential, to get into the workforce. Nothing wrong with retail or living in your parents' basement after you drop out of school. A lot of those people end up going back to school and finding a way forward. But wouldn't it be better to get that credential and at age 19, 20, be able to get that job, $50,000, $60,000 a year, as you can see, again, if you look at the descriptions of these jobs and what they are. And by the way, it's not just about young people coming up. It's about mid-career. It's about incumbent workers. It's about worker retraining. It's about ensuring that people who are currently, let's say, in a manufacturing job that does not automate and therefore need to switch over to be a computer programmer have the chance to get that certificate at age 50 and be able to get that job. So it needs to be more flexible all the way through.
What are we missing? I know I've been following your Twitter account for a long time before you knew it. But when you go around and you're meeting workers that are there, and some of these workers are either going to need to look at upskilling tracks. Some of these workers, I know you've been going around and looking at retirees that are looking at, really, in today's economy, the traditional retiree is still going to have to potentially work again or keep working or find different things. And I'm interested, as you sort of look at the package of things that surround workers today to manage their way through a turbocharged economy, what's missing? Retirement, education benefits, health. What can we do? What can you do to actually package the impacted worker more than we're doing today?
Well, I think you hit on it, which is lifetime learning, flexibility, access to training, good training. All these things are in the interests of our government because ultimately it's about filling the needs that are there in terms of the job market. One thing that I like about the community colleges, again, to get back to that, is the graduation at Marion and at Sinclair included young people starting at age 15. Someone at age 15 getting an associate's degree before he or she got, in this case, a guy got his driver's license.
I'm just kind of irritated by that. But,
I know, it bothers me too.
No,
really
I embrace
incredible,
it, sort of.
incredible young people. And then up to age 73.
Wow.
And Marion Tech last week up to age 68. I mean, even older than me. And so my point is, that's the future of work, in my view, is we have to be able to provide those opportunities to those individuals. Community colleges aren't the only place it can happen. It should happen more in terms of the 42 different worker retraining programs the federal government now sponsors in 6 or 7 agencies and departments, none of which really have appropriate measures of performance. I think we spend a lot of money, I think about $15 billion now on that it could be much better spent. This is, think of the WIA program or the Trade Adjustment Assistance Program. So we need to bring all this together in a way that's more flexible and provides a more responsive approach, because these jobs are going to change more quickly. The one thing we know about the future is change will happen more rapidly.
Do you think you're prepared in Ohio? One of the big challenges, I'm going to be interviewing Megan Smith later, who was President Obama's Chief Technology Officer of the administration, with a lot of other members of Congress and Senator Sherrod Brown. And a lot of times we talk about, the coming fourth industrial revolution, the world of artificial intelligence, machines talking to machines. And I guess I just had, there is this notion, it sounds like religious faith to me, that don't worry, we're just going to have more jobs created, and that's the mantra. But I just worry that things are happening at so fast, at such a scale, that we're going to see ourselves with millions of displaced truck drivers, millions of displaced other workers that all of a sudden don't have a place. I'm just wondering whether you share that concern.
I share the concern and the optimism both. Recently, Senator Martin Heinrich and I started this AI caucus, and we've introduced some legislation.
So Senator Heinrich is from New Mexico.
New Mexico. Yeah. And it's about AI. We have also introduced some legislation, including legislation with Brian Schatz on AI in government. And what we're trying to do is look at the challenges and the opportunities with AI. And I will say, publicly for the first time, no.
Okay, good.
I will say, I think a lot of folks
is it really good?
who are in the tech community, this can be good,
Yeah.
Including in the AI community, are coming to us and saying, thank you for doing this caucus. This is fantastic. I'm glad you guys are doing it, because the potential is so great, because technological change is going to be fantastic for the workforce. And our view is, maybe. I mean, it depends.
Right.
And it depends on a lot of things, by the way, which are out of the control of government, because technology, again, moving so rapidly. There's a study done recently saying, well, gosh, this technological change really hurt employment over the last 50 years. And when you think about it, really it hasn't, in a sense. Someone said the one job they could think of was an elevator operator. Guess what? In the United States Senate, we still have elevator operators. That's so how technologically behind we are. But that's the one job, that job was pushed out. But other jobs, have expanded. Our workforce has. We have more people working in America today than ever before, and so on. So there's a way to do it, but you make a good point, as an example, driving. And drivers is the biggest employment in America. It's the single most important job, I suppose you could say, when you combine, UPS and taxi drivers and Uber drivers and everybody else. So, yeah, I mean, it's at some point that truck driver is going to be a little nervous, because we're going to, I think, over time, be moving to automation. So we do have to figure this out. And again, the point is to be skilled, to be prepared, to be responsive. Some of these jobs, by the way, have shifted offshore already.
Right.
So think of customer service jobs. Those jobs are, when you call because you have a problem with your MasterCard, you are very likely to get somebody from overseas. Well, how do you bring those jobs back? So part of this is using automation to ensure that here in America, we can bring some of these jobs back. Maybe more of that can be automated, and maybe the software developers will be here.
So our time is way too short this morning, but I don't like doing forums without the questions. I'm going to go to you for at least one question out there, so you can compete for it or bid on eBay for the question. Yeah, so we'll go to you in just a second. I guess my last question was just a two-part, and if you could, we just make it real brief, is you've just worked with Senator Cardin in introducing a Retirement Security Act, which is, I'm interested in the dimensions of that, because I also think that's very relevant today when you talk about workers in the innovation age and what we do on that front. And the other, which may sound unrelated, but I sort of think it is related too, from signs of social stress and others, is you're working. Well, it's really, I want to be careful of applauding you too much.
Yeah, don't do that.
But I really appreciate what you're doing on the opioids crisis and sort of looking at workers and opioids and what we should do. And so just real short form, what does your Retirement Security Act with Ben Cardin do? And two, what is the answer on opioids and workers? Because isn't a lot of talent being left on the table?
Yes.
Because of rigid employment circumstances and those that are facing personal crises?
Yeah. Let me put those both in the context of today's discussion. With regard to the retirement plan, we have four major objectives. One, help baby boomers save more for retirement. 50% of baby boomers roughly have no nest egg in terms of private savings. Some have pensions, but it's unbelievable how little we have saved in my generation. So we help on cash-up contributions over 60 and so on. Small businesses, that's where most of the problem is with retirement. If you work for a big company, you likely have a good 401k. If you work for a small business, you're very likely not to have one. Part-time workers, poverty, a huge indicator, of course, of not having retirement savings. So we have a catch-up contribution essentially through a saver's credit for people who are under a certain income level.
Right.
And then finally, this notion of lifetime savings. When people are retiring, they're living longer. So this goes to your point earlier. One thing we say as an example is the minimum required distribution rules are crazy because it says at 70 and a half, and none of you are even approaching that, but Steve and I are, at 70 and a half, you have to start taking your money out of your 401k or your IRA. Why? Well, because the notion was at 70 and a half, everybody's retired, right? So there must be retirement income time. Well, guess what? A lot of 70 and a half-year-olds have called me back home or written me and said, this is crazy. I'm still working at 70 and a half. And by the way, if you're healthy and you're 70 and a half, we actually want you in the workforce.
Right.
These are very mature workers who have a lot of experience, are wanted in the workforce. And in the future workforce, I think it's even more true, both because we'll be living in longer, healthier lives, but because many of these jobs won't require that kind of physical exertion, but will require some experience and maturity. So I think it is related to this topic of work. We want to encourage that. So we take the age to 75. We say if you have less than 100 grand in your retirement account, you shouldn't be subject to a minimum distribution rule at all. And then flipping to the opioid issue, there are two very dramatic studies that are really shocking, which say that of those people who are out of work altogether, and others people who aren't even showing up to look for a job and are not reflected in the Labor Department BLS unemployment numbers.
Right.
We have relatively low worker participation rates right now relative to what we've had historically. So if you assume we go back to just the normal labor force participation rate historically, and specifically to the year of 2008, let's say, before the Great Recession, just assume that's the participation rate, guess what the unemployment rate would be today? 8.3%. Now, if we were in an economy of 8.3% unemployment, what would we be saying? In Congress, we'd be pulling our hair out. How do we get these people back to work? Oh my gosh. Right. Instead, we think we're living in a 3.5% rate workforce.
So the data is lying.
We need to do more here. And here's what the two studies show. They show that roughly half of the men, roughly 7.5, 8 million men who are out of work and not looking for work, who are in this category, acknowledge taking a pain medication on a daily basis in one and the day before in the other. 2/3 of those men in one of the studies said it's a prescription pain medication. What does that mean? This means that the opioid crisis, which we all know is the worst drug crisis we've had in our country, improving a little bit now, has sapped our workforce. So when you look at the reasons people are not working, there are lots of them. Some would say it's government dependency. Others would say it's the skills gap, which we talked about earlier. Some would say it's aging baby boomers. Actually, none of those answer the question.
Right.
I think the bigger issue is the fact that these people are out of work because they are addicted, and we need to deal, therefore, with the treatment and recovery side of this in order to get people back to work and out of the shadows.
Great. 10-second question and 10-second response. Got to be very fast. We're right at the end.
WorkCred, affiliate of the American National Standards Institute.
Yeah.
You talked about certificates at the community college level, and certainly I'm one of the believers that this non-credit credit division is really false, that everything should count. But a lot of those certificate programs end in industrial certifications.
I got to bring it to a question because we're right at the end,
Can you put certifications also in that bill? Because certifications are a short-circuited way to get employment, and often industry certifications are ignored. And also...
I apologize. He's got a hard stop. So thank you. Can you respond to the question about certification?
If you don't mind, give me your card, and we'll get you some information on where we are on the bill. But I do think that we have essentially covered that by saying these should be industry-recognized credentials. But maybe there's a more specific way to align, because I agree. And by the way, a huge fan of community colleges, as you can tell. It's not all community colleges. I mean, there are certificate granting programs outside of community colleges as well. Career and technical, as you know, in most states, including Ohio, you can get college credit while you're in high school, which is why this young man, who upsets you so much, graduated at age 15 before he got his driver's license with an associate's degree. But very, very good point in general, which is, let's align this. Let's be sure that what we're doing in terms of training people up actually is what the workforce needs. And this is one of our issues with our federal worker retraining programs for incumbent workers, is much of what we're training people up for apparently is not what the community is actually looking for in terms of jobs. And that is going to be required with the future of work.
As you leave, are Ohioans winning or losing in our trade standoff with China?
Well, yet to be seen. I mean, if we succeed with regard to China, it will be a huge victory, because it will deal with the structural problem we've got with China. Obviously, we have a trade imbalance. We send them about $190 billion a year. They send us about $560 billion a year. So we got a big trade imbalance. We know that. But it's the tech transfer issue and the subsidy issue. These are tough issues to address, having tried to do it.
So you sound doubtful.
Well, no, I think if we could come up with a resolution of this, in addition to just putting up tariffs, which need to come down when you have a resolution, it would be very good for Ohio and good for the country.
Ladies and gentlemen, Senator Rob Portman, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.